Dr. Michelle May, welcome to Food Experience Unplugged.
Nice to see you again, Michelle.
Oh, nice to see you again as well. I was just reflecting on our previous podcast episode that we recorded, and wow, it has been a journey in terms of how much your mindful eating programs and your ability to help people has grown so much.
Yeah, it's been funny. The pandemic has offered some silver linings for some of us, and part of that for me has been really expanding my virtual work and reaching people that I may never have been able to help before. So in that way, I'm grateful.
This podcast is available on multiple platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. Please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to be informed as new episodes become available. If you enjoyed today's episode or any of our episodes, please rate and review the podcast on your favorite platform. As always, check out our website at foodexperienceunplugged.com for some resources as you begin your health journey. To get started, will you take a moment to introduce yourself and what brought you to this point in your career? I know we had touched on that previously, but you focus a lot on yo-yo dieting. So why did you decide to focus on that as part of your career?
Well, my background, my training is as a family physician, and I did that for 16 years. But at the same time, and long before that, I personally was struggling with yo-yo dieting myself. And many of my patients were too. So I found that for me and for many of them, I would go on a diet, very sincere, very enthusiastic, very excited, the new year kind of resolution sort of thing. And no matter how hard I tried, I really was never able to stick to it permanently. And I discovered that many of my patients weren't either. That really caused me to think, this isn't working for me. I got through medical school, so it's not a lack of willpower. It's really a system that doesn't work for most people. And so that led me down the path of creating a program that literally shifts the way that we relate to food and our bodies.
Okay. Now, just to put everyone on the same page, so to speak, what exactly do we mean by yo-yo dieting and why is it so problematic?
I actually love the term yo-yo dieting because it's so descriptive. So I actually have a yo-yo right here to show you what I mean, although you can't see me fully, but we all know what a yo-yo does, right? So when we are on a diet, we're holding on, we're being good, we're doing everything that we should, we're following the rules, we're looking food up and we're writing food down or logging it into our app. And at first it feels kind of exciting. We feel like we're in control again, right? Of course, if you've ever used a yo-yo, this isn't a very fun way to play with a yo-yo, right? Eventually, we can't stick to all those rules so rigidly. An anniversary comes, or maybe we're stressed out, or somebody takes us out to dinner. And so we break the rules. We end up going off the diet and then back on again, off the diet and back on again. And so for myself and many of the people that I work with, this cycle of on the diet, off the diet, on the diet, off the diet is about being in control, then losing control, getting back in control, then losing control. And the problem is that for most of us, we can't make a yo-yo stop in the middle. We are constantly either headed back on the diet or back off the diet. And so what really I think yo-yo dieting is about is trying to do something that is not sustainable at all. So what I like to do instead with the people that I work with is we roll the yo-yo out and we turn it into a pendulum instead. Now, I'm not trying to hypnotize you into believing everything I'm saying, but the idea here is that a pendulum still has extremes. Maybe sometimes we're being more careful about what we're eating. Sometimes we're not, the holidays, for example. But unlike a yo-yo, a pendulum does have a middle. So there is a middle between the extremes where we have the flexibility to eat the foods that we love, the awareness to love the foods that we eat and to notice which foods love us. And therefore, we're able to make decisions no matter what situation shows up. So instead of trying to be in control and then losing control, we are in charge instead. We're making decisions for ourselves in the context of whatever else is happening. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Absolutely. I love your analogy, of course, but also in focusing on instead of being in control, being in charge of what you eat.
Yes, yes. And I think anybody who's done any dieting at all knows that feeling of being in control. And we also know how bad it feels when we're suddenly out of control. We feel guilty, we feel ashamed. We say things like, well, I've already blown it, I might as well keep eating. And then we develop this self fulfilling prophecy of eating so much that eventually our only choice is to go back on another diet. And here's the thing, it does not have to be that way. It really doesn't have to be that way. If you can learn how to be in charge, and understandably, there are certain skills associated with that. Once you learn how to be in charge, you don't have to worry about the anniversary or the dinner out or the holidays or even stress eating because you begin to feel like you can make decisions no matter what's going on.
Mm. And now, in terms of the yo-yo effect, is that why many people move from one type of diet to another, hoping for some different result?
Oh, it's such a good point, Michelle, because sometimes people think if they start a different diet that they're doing something different. You're not. It's still a diet. And of course, right now that diet industry realizes that there's a lot of us out there talking about the fact that they don't work. There's lots of research that shows that they don't create sustainable changes. So what the diet industry is doing is changing their language to pretend they're not diets. They're calling
Mm.
themselves wellness programs. Some of them are even calling themselves mindful eating, which I really resent, given that that's the area that I've been working in for the last couple of decades. The truth of the matter is, if the plan you're doing is asking you to look things up, write things down, if it's putting certain foods on a good list or a bad list, if it's asking you to limit things based on their rules, it's a diet. And as a result of that, it is not likely to be something you can do for the rest of your life. And that's what I always used to ask my patients to think about. If this isn't something you can imagine doing every day for the rest of your life, don't bother. Because as soon as you go back to the old patterns, the old behaviors, all of the same challenges will be right back again.
Mm, okay. Now, with that yo-yo diet and your own experiences with yo-yo dieting, what information or lack of information, I guess, was available at that time that you were struggling with your own yo-yo dieting?
Well, some the diet I used to turn to again and again is still around. Many of them are, yet there's been a plethora of new diets, which should tell us something, right? All of a sudden, we should be thinking, okay, if there's literally millions of hits in Google when I look up the word diets, then you must know that they aren't effective for anybody for very long, or there wouldn't be so many of them, and I wouldn't have tried so many times. Back then, I didn't have the internet. I didn't realize that many people were struggling with the same thing at first. I thought there was something wrong with me. And actually, this is a common theme in my clients and my coaching clients is they are often very successful in different areas of their lives. They may be mothers or CEOs or have other careers that they really enjoy and are great at, yet they have this little secret. Their relationship with food continues to be a problem for them. And they've developed this feeling of shame because they think that they just don't have willpower. They're too weak willed. They don't have self control. But as we talked about a moment ago, really, this is not about control. It's about learning how to be in charge. In other words, learning how to become your own expert.
Mm. Now, being in charge, does that mean relinquishing control, or where's that balance, I guess, between being in control and being in charge?
Well, control is an illusion anyway. As I mentioned, there's all kinds of circumstances that are going to arise that will take your ability to control what and how much food is available or even what time you're able to eat. So thinking that we're going to control our environment permanently so that we never are exposed to our trigger foods or our scary foods or the foods that we've struggled with, that's an illusion. So being in charge is not about not eating certain foods. In fact, one of the tenets of Am I Hungry is that we believe all foods can fit in a balanced diet, all foods. Now, that doesn't mean you eat all foods. You get to decide for yourself what's a fit for you. But for many people, you need to start out by really letting go of control, not putting foods on a bad list anymore, so that you're able to choose freely. Now, naturally, remember the pendulum. Naturally, if you've been restricting a food for a long period of time, thinking of it as bad, then the minute you let control go, you might at first want it more than ever because you haven't let yourself have it. It's normal for your pendulum to shift over here for a while. But if you keep telling yourself, well, that's just food, I'm allowed to have it, I didn't break any rules, I wasn't bad, I don't feel guilty, then eventually that food loses power and it just becomes food again. And you're back in the middle here where you're free to choose that food when you really want it. And you're surprised to discover that you don't really want it all the time when you're allowed to have it anytime you want. It's one of these things that is consistently surprising to my clients. They swear, well, wait a minute, if I let myself eat chocolate, that's all I want. Well, part of the reason that some people crave chocolate constantly is because they don't let themselves eat it when they want it. So they end up putting it up on a pedestal that gives it more power over them. Once it is not on the pedestal anymore and they're free to choose it, why would you want chocolate breakfast, lunch, and dinner? You can have it when you really want it. Now, Michelle, an important piece of this that we haven't even touched yet that I need to talk about, though, is that for many people who feel like they have problems with certain foods, blame the foods or blame their own willpower. But sometimes it's really because they're eating those foods in response to other needs. So if I could explain this concept, I think it's so helpful for people to realize why they've kind of gotten trapped. I actually call this whole thing the eat, repent, repeat cycle. It's even a better term than yo-yo dieting because it really describes what many of us do. We eat, and then we repent for eating, and then we repeat the cycle again and again. Part of the reason this happens, besides the fact that we put a lot of foods up on a pedestal, is that we're using food to meet our needs. So if you can imagine, another metaphor, I love metaphors when I teach, if you can imagine that your needs, all of your body's needs, all of your needs can be categorized into two buckets. Pretty simple concept, overly simplistic, of course. One bucket are your fuel needs. The other bucket is everything else you need. So we've got fuel, we've got everything else. So in the everything else bucket, it might be water or fluids. It might be rest or sleep. It might be comfort, connection, validation, feeling heard, feeling understood, and so on and so forth. So what happens for some people is that we eat when we're hungry, we're filling a fuel need. And sometimes we feel other discomfort besides hunger, and we try to eat to meet that need. When we're eating, even though our body doesn't need fuel at that time, we're filling the wrong bucket. Our fuel needs are running over, yet our other needs bucket is still empty. And when that bucket is still empty, we develop very powerful cravings. A lot of people I work with find it very difficult to stop eating once they start. And part of the reason is because their true needs haven't been met. Is this making sense, Michelle?
Absolutely. Now that sounds like often when people turn to emotional eating or binging or worse, developing eating disorders or other illnesses.
Yeah, and I think those are complex issues, very, very complex issues. And for many people, they feel completely overwhelmed and powerless and bad about themselves. The truth of the matter is that these issues can be healed. We can teach you a new way to make decisions about food that aren't about restriction and deprivation, and also a better way to meet all of these other needs that you may have been attempting to meet with food or eating. So it's a very simple concept, not necessarily easy, but that's why we exist, is to help people find a completely different way to figure this out instead of just wasting their money on one more diet that only makes them feel worse in the long run.
Okay. And your work with mindful eating, with the banishing, if you will, that eat, repent, repeat cycle, that helps to overcome or at least minimize the risk of yo-yo dieting.
Yeah, so what we're really doing is replacing the patterns of behavior that people have developed habitually with new patterns, new ways of thinking. So here's the challenge. Now, Michelle, you and I are talking about this. I think we both understand this. The truth is that we are immersed in diet culture. We are
Mm.
surrounded by messages that tell us that certain foods are good, certain foods are bad, you shouldn't eat these. If you do, you have to exercise more to burn them off. I mean, there's just a constant influx of messages that are about what you should and shouldn't eat. So it's challenging for people who live in diet culture and who have internalized those messages to believe that there might be a completely different way of thinking about food. So I get it if this sounds like something that, well, it wouldn't work for me, or that sounds impossible. I could never eat what I love or have chocolate in the house. And I can only tell you, I get it. I was there. I am you. I had disordered eating for probably 20 plus years of my life. And about this point in my life, I've almost surpassed more years of having a healthy relationship with food, but more important, have worked with thousands of people who now have a healthy relationship with food. So even if you're feeling discouraged, even if you're feeling like it could never work for you, I want to tell you, it doesn't have to be that way. There is another option, and it can be learned.
Mm. Now, for those who are just starting or thinking about starting that mindful eating road, is there often some trepidation when they first start something like that? Perhaps they think, oh, it's just another diet.
Well, yes, in fact, that's interesting because one of the things I find happens is because of our diet trained minds, people will want to turn mindful eating into a diet. So let me give you a
Mm.
specific example. One of the early skills that we teach is how to recognize the difference between our fuel needs and all of our other needs.
Mm.
That's a very essential skill, and many people don't realize that they've even lost that skill or maybe never even had it. So, a simple idea is whenever you feel like eating, pause for a moment and check in to notice whether you're physically hungry. Now, I'm simplifying this. We have a whole process that we go through to help people learn how to do this. But you simply ask, okay, am I actually hungry? Now, if you are hungry, then likely it means that your body needs fuel. If you aren't hungry, then it's possible that there was some other reason that you feel like eating. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're thirsty, maybe you're stressed, maybe it's time for a break, and your body has given you this sense of discomfort that you've misinterpreted as a need for food. Okay, simple idea. Well, people who are diet trained, as most of us are, we go, oh, okay, so I can only eat when I'm hungry. No, that would be another rule. That would turn this into another diet. And so that's not what we're saying. The reason to ask yourself whether you're hungry is not to decide whether you're allowed to eat. The reason to ask yourself whether you're hungry is to figure out why you want to. It helps
Mm.
you get from, oh, food, 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 to, okay, what are my true needs? How can I take care of myself better? When you're hungry and you need food, food will be very satisfying and enjoyable. When you're not hungry, you could still eat if you wanted to. Some people who don't struggle with food sometimes eat for pleasure or convenience or stress or whatever, celebration. It's part of normal eating to sometimes eat when you're not hungry. When you do this and then realize, oh, yeah, I was stressed out and I ate anyway, now I'm full and I'm still stressed out. In other words, every mistake becomes a learning opportunity. That's
Mm.
very different from dieting, where you've got to follow the rules, log it in, write it down, be good, pay penance with exercise if you weren't good. And again, that pattern leads to the eat, repent, repeat cycle, not to sustainable changes. Learning is what leads to sustainable changes.
Mm. And then you can make educated judgments about when to eat or when not to eat.
Correct. And that's also another important point. It's not so much about eating or not eating. It's eating or making another choice. Remember, you're in charge. So one choice might be to simply redirect your attention to something else until you get hungry. So for example, you notice that you're not hungry at that moment and you're craving chocolate and you think to yourself, "Oh gosh, I'm not hungry. Let me find something else to do until I get hungry. And if I still want chocolate, then I'll have it." Right?
Mm.
Or another option might be to try to figure out why you feel like eating chocolate and do something about that. So, for example, a common one that I experienced and many of my clients experience is this mid afternoon craving for something sweet.
Mm.
Well, for myself, what I figured is sometimes I am hungry. I literally need a snack at that point, and I can choose what to eat. I may not choose chocolate if I'm really looking for something to hold me over until dinner time. I get to choose what I eat too. Oftentimes, though, what I realize when I pause is, oh, wait, I'm not actually hungry. I've been sitting at my computer for 2 hours straight without even standing up. I need a break. It's time for me to get up and go do something else, anything else, put a load of laundry in, go play with my dog, check my social media, whatever it is, find something else to do for a little bit, and then come back to work when I feel refreshed. And so, what asking, Am I hungry, does is it helps us start to meet our own needs even better than food ever could.
Mm. And that kind of infuses a little bit of planning into the situation so people can decide, okay, it's 10 o'clock. I'm not really hungry now, but I've got back to back meetings for the next 3 hours. Well, I could eat something now, or I could wait, and then I'm like starving in the afternoon. They can have that opportunity to make educated choices.
Exactly, exactly. And again, there's a lot of nuance to this. I mean, I teach a 3 month course on this to my mindful eating support community. So I don't want to oversimplify the idea. But for example, relating to what you just said, when you check in to ask yourself whether you're hungry and you say, yeah, I am, the next question is, well, how hungry am I?
Mhm.
Because how hungry you are is going to help you determine what kind of food you might choose and how much you want to eat at that given time. If you're only a little bit hungry, you probably only need a little bit of food. And this is a mistake that people can commonly make, which is they feel a little bit hungry and they sit down to a full meal and then they feel uncomfortably full. So they go from the discomfort of being a little hungry to the discomfort of being overly full. So it helps to notice how hungry you are. You also mentioned, for example, if you've got back to back meetings, at the other end, you might feel overly hungry. Well, hunger is basically a set of symptoms that comes from an empty stomach and a falling blood sugar or blood glucose. Your brain depends on glucose for energy to make decisions and to think clearly. So when we haven't eaten, we might notice that we're not thinking clearly. We're making mistakes. We're hangry or irritable. So, trying to prevent ourselves from getting to that level of hunger can be really helpful because at that point, it's harder to make decisions. And so, when you do find yourself that hungry, and it's going to happen because remember, you're not in control of every situation. If you find yourself that hungry, remember being really, really hungry doesn't mean you need more food than usual. It just means you need to eat soon. Again, this is a mistake people commonly make is they are really, really, really hungry, so they order twice as much, or they order an extra side, or they serve themselves two portions, and then again, they go from being uncomfortably hungry to uncomfortably full. These are nuances, but these are things that people can learn and discover for themselves. So again, they're in charge of deciding when to eat, what to eat, and how much to eat.
I love that. I love just how being in charge allows you to adjust in terms of quantity or quality of food.
Yes, and it's not looking things up and writing things down. It's not following somebody else's rules. That's an outside in way to make decisions about eating. This is really about an inside out way of making decisions. Notice your own sensations. Are you hungry? How hungry are you? Are you tired, thirsty, stressed, etc.? You see, your body is constantly giving you information about how to take care of it, absolutely constantly giving you information. If you can pay attention to that information, you can begin to take care of yourself better, eating when you're hungry, drinking when you're thirsty, resting when you need sleep, and so on and so forth. It's not about not eating, it's about taking care of yourself even better.
I love that because you have the balance of those two buckets that you spoke with what's the food portion and then what's everything else going on in your life.
That's right. That's right. And for many of the people I work with, they have developed automatic habits of using food to try to meet other needs. The tricky part is that food works temporarily. I mean, for a little while, you might be distracted from an uncomfortable emotion, or if you're tired, you might feel briefly energized. Certainly, food brings us pleasure. The challenge is that it doesn't work very long. It's just temporary. So that's why people end up redosing themselves with more food, because it didn't really give them the lasting effects that they were hoping for. Once you learn how to recognize your true needs, it's much easier to begin to at least try things on and try new ways of meeting those needs.
Absolutely. And now, speaking of meeting needs, in your years of going through these programs and trainings, have you found that a certain percentage or of people are actually the hungry for food area versus mostly, or a certain percentage is really other areas, whether it be sleep or some other situation going on in their lives?
Well, I don't know what the percentages are. I mean, I actually could give you some numbers on that, but let me back up a bit. So, we use a process called the mindful eating cycle to teach these different skills that we're talking about. So, these are not concepts, they're not ethereal. These are very specific skills that can be learned, and that's what we teach people how to do, and that's what we help them practice. We talk about the mindful eating cycle as a way of recognizing our patterns of eating. So, the eating you just described, where people primarily eat when they're hungry, is what we call instinctive eating. In other words, they are using their body's instinct to tell them when they need fuel, which is, after all, how we're all born. We're all born with the ability to know when our body needs fuel. Now, we cry because a baby doesn't know how to explain, my diaper is wet, I'm tired, I've been held too much, I haven't been held enough, I'm hungry. So a discerning caregiver has to figure out what the different cries mean. But if the caregiver is able to do that and feed their child when they're hungry and meet the other needs with the other ways of taking care of that baby can grow up still recognizing and trusting their instinctive cues of hunger and satiety. Now, some of us get through childhood just fine, and then we start dieting, and then dieting disconnects us from our ability to know and trust our own cues of hunger and satiety. So in dieting, we call that the restrictive eating cycle. We're trying to make decisions based on rules in order to try to change our body size or manage a health condition, or in some other way, moving away from listening to and trusting our own body signals. And then many of the people I work with also struggle with overeating, where and when I say overeating, I don't mean eating more than the portion size on the box. What I mean is that they are eating to the point that they feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And they often are doing this because they are trying to meet other needs by eating. I will tell you, the largest group of all for my clients are people who vacillate back and forth between their overeating cycle and then their restricted eating cycle, which should sound familiar to you by now as the eat, repent, repeat cycle I talked about at the beginning. So people who eat instinctively are less likely to come to me for help because oftentimes they're not struggling with food. They're really not. Now, can they benefit from the mindful eating skills that we teach? Absolutely. Everybody eats, and everybody could benefit from more awareness about the decisions that they're making. It's the people who are really struggling. They are finding that they just don't want to do another diet, or they feel bad about themselves, and they really want healing and peace, and they want to be able to use all that energy they've been spending thinking about food in their body in other more productive ways instead of postponing their life until something changes.
Absolutely. And then when things do change, or if a situation comes up in their life, they're able to assess and answer that "Am I hungry?" question a little bit better, sounds
Yes,
like.
yes, exactly.
Oh, fantastic. Now, what does that healthy relationship with food look like? You're speaking about the mindful eating program and those things. How can people cross that bridge and really get started on being more mindful in their eating?
Well, I love the term healthy relationship with food and with your body, because it's similar to other relationships in our lives. We can't expect our relationships to be healthy if we're not paying attention to them, or if we're really rigid in the way that we approach them. So, mindful eating is a great path into learning how to relate in a healthier way to food and our bodies. I'm not saying that you shouldn't pay attention to nutrition. No, of course not. What I'm saying is that instead of being rigid about what you eat, Let's come up with a more flexible way to think about eating so you're not wasting so much time and energy on it.
Hmm.
Now, Am I Hungry? I mean, our whole mission is to change the way the world thinks about eating. So we offer lots of different approaches, not approaches so much, it's all one thing, but lots of different ways for people to access this. And I think a really simple thing that could help somebody get started is we have a new quiz that you could take. And I'll send you the URL, but basically it's amihungry.com/quiz dash what dash is dash my dash eating dash cycle. So I'll send you that link, but it's basically amihungry.com quiz, what is my eating cycle? It's a very short 60-second quiz that will help you hone in on whether you're in an instinctive eating cycle, an overeating cycle, a restrictive eating cycle, or an eat, repent, repeat cycle. And once you can start to recognize your patterns instead of continuing to act out of habit, now you are prepared for your first step in changing those patterns.
Mm, okay. And then they can make educated judgments and really hone in on their own mindful eating.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And again, I know the concept sounds simple. It's not easy for everybody, but it is truly life changing. So the big thing that I've been able to really focus in on since the pandemic is our mindful eating support community. So we have programs where we work with a small group of people once a week for 90 minutes. I teach a workshop and do some group coaching with them every week, and through that process can completely transform the way that they think about food and give them the freedom to go live their lives. This is not like some other diet where you get a lifetime membership. No, you do this, you learn it, you own the lifetime membership. It is yours for the rest of your life, and you can go on and do other things with your energy.
Fabulous. Now, over the years, how has your own mindful eating developed, changed, hopefully for the better? Do you find yourself more in tune with those types of things?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's actually transformed a lot. And I think the more that I work with other people and hear their stories and see what's helping them the most, it has transformed. Even what I was teaching 10 years ago has changed and evolved. I think one of the big things that I've really recognized in myself and many of the people I work with is something that I've always said that I really understand, which is it's not about the food. In other words, mindful eating is a great doorway into mindful living. As people begin to learn the skills and strategies and tools that we teach for managing their eating without restriction and deprivation, they begin to apply those skills in other areas of their lives. They begin to think less in terms of good and bad and more in terms of what works and what doesn't work and what might work better. They develop more curiosity and less judgment. They develop more of a present moment awareness instead of planning that, okay, one day when I get off this diet, then I'll be happy and healthy. And they look for ways that they can be happy and healthy right now. And that's really what mindful eating and mindfulness is all about.
Fantastic. I love that bridge between the mindful eating and the mindful living to really address it almost addresses both buckets.
It doesn't almost address it, it totally addresses it. Because as people learn to listen to their signals about whether they're hungry or not, they also begin to tune in to listen to the other signals that the body is giving us constantly about how to take care of it. I mean, just think about this simple idea, Michelle. We call emotions feelings because they often cause physical sensations in the body. We feel our emotions. So as people become better attuned to their body and what messages it's sending them, they're better able to notice the other feelings that they have. Well, here's the connection there. Your feelings are indicating what your needs might be. So, for example, if you're feeling lonely, your need is connection. And so instead of trying to stuff down that lonely feeling, you reach out to a friend or you hop on social media and connect with somebody that you know, or you text somebody or some way connect with somebody else. Now you use the information of loneliness not as an uncomfortable feeling to push away, but as a way of understanding what you're needing at that moment.
I love that. And then you can address it in a healthy way rather than binge eating or turning to food as more of a refuge.
Yes, and by the way, maybe
Mhm.
some listeners don't use food, but maybe they use other ways of pushing things away. Obviously, drugs and alcohol might be an option, but in our culture, we revere people who exercise. And so there might be people who excessively exercise to avoid feeling their feelings, or people who turn to perfectionism, which was one of my challenges, was trying to do everything perfectly so I could feel good about myself, when in truth I was never going to get there. That's not, perfection isn't possible and it's not necessary. So even if your issue isn't food, if you are using other ways of coping or distracting yourself from your feelings, you're missing an opportunity to meet your truest needs and to take better care of yourself.
I love that. I just love that the care that you focus on you rather than letting other things control you.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
You're in charge.
Absolutely. Oh, well, Michelle, what things are on the horizon for you in terms of your programs or other ways that you're serving?
Thanks for asking. Our website is amihungry.com, and there are loads of free resources there, blogs and articles, quizzes, things like that that can help you get more insight into what's going on. And as you begin to make this shift, it's important to ask for assistance if you need it. So we have a mindful eating support community. You can find that on our website. We have a really good search tool there. Just look up support and you'll find that page. We also train other health and wellness professionals to offer mindful eating programs in their communities. So you may be able to find somebody right in your own backyard or somebody you can work with virtually. And of course, if you just want to get started, my book, Eat What You Love What You Eat, is a really great place to start. It'll explain that mindful eating cycle. And we let you download a free chapter. So if you go to amihungry.com/chapter 1, spell out chapter and the number one, you can download it for free just to see if it makes sense for you.
Fantastic. Well, we will include all of those things in the show notes. Michelle, it has been a pleasure having you back on the show. I love how you're addressing so many different needs. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Michelle.
Hey, everyone. Michelle Seidling here at Food Experience Unplugged. Are you enjoying the Food Experience Unplugged podcast and are ready to ramp it up a level? Then it's time to go premium. With a premium podcast membership, in addition to all the great podcast episodes you know and love, you'll receive additional bonus content and exclusive interviews from many of our podcast guests. You'll receive a live Q&A access each month where I'll address questions pertaining to holistic health and how you can start your journey. You'll also receive weekly shorter video clips with information on tips, tricks, and strategies to get started, to build consistent habits, and to take charge of your health. Go premium today. I'll see you there.